I'm very happy to host here in our Dilemma Academy Irena Grudzińska-Gross, who came from New York to us, but for many years she was professor of different American universities. The last was Princeton University, there was Boston University, there were some other universities as well. But it was, I would say, not a voluntary decision of Irena to become an emigre. And when she was very, very young, 1968 came. And in this country, 1968 means something different than the counterculture movement, for example, in the West, or unfortunately, it was a very strict and full of hatredness campaign, anti-Semitic campaign launched by communist regime, but also, using this anti-Semitic, resentments in the society, in the community, against opposition, against, liberal people. Under communist regime living in Poland, and Irena was one of these brave rioting persons taking side, against regime. And as a very young woman, she ended up in the prison. And then she receives this one-way ticket to the West, first to Italy, then to United States. And probably Irena will tell you more about this, because part of the story about Miłosz is a story about being emigre and being on exile, living on exile. But what I would add to that is that Irena first never broke the contact with the country. So she was being there, she was always engaged with dissident movement, underground movement in Poland, and always in touch, always with publishings, the kind of samizdat we had, and always with, especially when Solidarity movement came to the existence, she was engaged in promotion that movement in the West, fundraising, gaining support for that. And after, when it was martial law and all this, she was like an ambassador of people of Polish opposition in the United States, and not only, for Jacek Kuroń, for Adam Michnik, for the leaders of Polish opposition. They had Irena in New York, in United States, to translate, to present, to promote, and to help. So this is one of the story. Irena as an activist, as an anti-totalitarian activist, as a human rights activist. Then the period came when she was engaged in Ford Foundation for many years to support civic society movements, mostly in Central Eastern Europe, not only in different corners of the world, as well in Africa, in Sri Lanka, in other parts of the world, being one of the leaders of the Department of Civic Rights movements in Ford Foundation for many years. That's how we've met, in fact, for the first time. And and the second level is the intellectual activities of Irena as a public intellectual, as an academic, as a professor of different universities, and authors of important books. Among them, there are two books about Czesław Miłosz. One is about the magnetic field. That's how it is translated into English. Magnetic field, Miłosz Brodzki. And the second one is Miłosz and the Long Shadow of the War, which I think will talk about here the position of Miłosz toward the war during the Second World War, which is unusual and something very actual, I think, not only in Poland, but other places as well. So she is here also like authors of this book, and we will have this afternoon and tomorrow afternoon to explore more and to put on the map of our Dilemma Academy Miłosz as Veronica said, point of reference that we can have, figures. That's what we spoke about during our first meeting of Dilemma Academy, that our map, in this part of the world between Central Europe and Caucasus is full of empty points, yes, and we don't know much about ourselves, at least not enough. So this is one of the aim also of our academy, to make this map more dense and to give to us, strong point of reference to explore deeply personalities, people like Sayadnova or Miłosz, because I somehow believe that Miłosz on that borderlands is a little bit like Sayadnova elsewhere. So that's to say at the beginning. And now, Irenko, I'm giving you the voice, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to begin with say that we actually, 1968 in Poland was actually a student movement, which was very similar, not countercultural, but because it was a socialist country after all, but it was a similar movement to the one that was in the West and in Mexico and in the United States and in the west of Europe. And the only thing was that the movement was cut short very quickly. So we somehow did not appear. We did it all in reaction to what was happening in Czechoslovakia at the time and to what was happening with the Czech student movements as well, and with this kind of liberalization of system of the regime, the so-called socialism with a human face. And it was a lot of fun too. It was very. We did a lot of things, a lot of noise, and but we were very quickly and very brutally stopped. And as a result of it, part of us, it was one of the party. The decision was to blame all of it not on the Jews, but on the Zionists. And therefore, there was this basically forced emigration of the remnants of what I didn't understand at that time, what was the remnant of the Polish Jewish community, or I don't know, nation. That is, it was 25 years after the end of Second World War, and it was 25 years after the stopping of towards almost total extermination of Polish Jews. So this was something that was truly extraordinary, but neither I nor my colleagues, we did not understand this very well because we were part of of a culture that we were not aware of, and we did not consider ourselves in our majority Jewish at all. Generally people were thinking that this was such a gimmick, party gimmick, that they just wanted to mobilize population against this liberalizing movement by stirring up anti-Semitism. So the anti-Semitism by itself and the history of anti-Semitism was not really taken into consideration. This is a very complicated issue, but I just wanted to add to it that I feel that obviously it was a movement, and obviously it was an anti-government and anti-regime movement, and it was one of the things that happened was the end, the real end of the last 23,000 people emigrated. So it was very small emigration. 23,000 people emigrated, and that was just kind of like the final stamp which said done. And what's happening now is some kind of what is called revival, but this revival is something very new because it is all organized by and funded by the American Jewish organizations. So it's a different kind of let's say, a new beginning. So rather than the revival of this incredibly rich culture that was and history that was here, because the Polish Jewish community before the war was the second big after United States, but it was the second as far as the size, numbers, community with a very, very long, incredibly complicated and rich history. And it was wiped out. It wiped out both physically and in the culture as well. In fact, the pogranicze here is one of the few places which revived some of the buildings and some of the traditions. In fact, I find it, you are going to be at this concert soon of Klezmer Orchestra. It's a very, I find it incredibly moving that they were able, I should say we, because I so identify so much with them. They do the work, I identify with them. That they found a way of somehow what Krzysztof said about the ethos, that they found a way of keeping memory live of that culture without building it into a monument or petrifying it, making it alive. There was a very interesting story that I remembered yesterday when I was listening at this concert, that the first time I came here with a group of people, maybe it was the second time, I came with the vice president of the Ford Foundation, who was he was born to a Jewish refugee community in China of Jews, and he the orchestra was already there at its beginning. So the thing that I really wanted him to see was this concert. He immediately fell asleep, and so then later on I asked him, I mean, weren't you interested in the thing? And he said, you are interested. I grew up on it. So they really managed to do something that is. I'm lacking the words because don't want to repeat what Krzysztof said.
But the word is we.
We, yeah, and so that it is in a synagogue, and this synagogue is at the same time remembering the people who were going to that synagogue before, but at the same time it is doing something that is continuing as a memory in a situation which I think people are not aware of, but in a situation in which this is like an Atlantis, the Polish Jewish tradition. I mean, they are gone, and this is not really understood. There are various movements that are made that on the one hand there are these new Jewish communities that want to believe that they are reviving this culture, and the government and so on trying the kind of the majoritarian culture trying to pretend that nothing. Yes, there was a war. Germans did some horrible things, but now everything is okay. So this is the introduction. As far as Miłosz was somebody who was very, very aware of this situation. He was. It's an interesting thing because I don't know if. I will have to tell a little bit about him, but I want to, now that we are with the Jews, I will tell a little bit about, there is a paradoxical thing that Miłosz was born in 1911, and he was part of, he came from a nobility, from a family of nobles, but nobility, he was born in what today is Lithuania, what at that time was part of the Russian Empire. In 1911, so the Russian Empire in that place lasted for another 5 years. Yes, so there was a war and so on. And then the family decided to go to Poland after 1918. But however, he was born in this completely different world. The nobility there was colonizers. I mean that the language of culture.
Colonizers, okay.
Yes, yes. They were colonizers, which he had a very clear consciousness of, and so he was born to a family that was ethnically complicated, a little bit Polish, a little bit Lithuanian, a little bit German, but the language was Polish because this was the language of culture. And so this is one element which is very important. And the second one that goes with it is that this was a nobility that could not after 1914 continue its way of living, that is of having possessions and having manors and having peasants working for them. And so this nobility was impoverished and had to really make a living. So this is where this people like Czesław Miłosz and was in a similar situation a little bit like educated Jews in Poland. And he had a lot of friends, and he understood very well the situation of assimilating, Polonizing Jews, because both this impoverished nobility and Jewish intelligentsia, they were socially in a certain way in an uncertain position. Jews much more, of course, than, but he had a lot, especially among literary people, and wrote about it in his prose, and wrote about it with a language that is very open and very clear, and without any hesitation. In Polish, I don't know about your languages, but in Polish, the word Jew is very uncomfortable, and the Jewish is also uncomfortable. People would say Israelite, people would say of Jewish origin, and so on. Now, Miłosz, when he wrote about it, he just wrote about it. And he just used the words as if, without really giving into it. This is only one of many special characteristics of Miłosz. Yeah, he wasn't. He was from a noble family, Szlachta. Yes, he was from Szlachta. Now, I wanted to know that what degree of do you know about Miłosz? Did you hear about Miłosz? Is this the first time that no?
I have read Isa River and poems.
Aha. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. Really. Uh-huh. So you are a Lithuanian, so that's the goal. So we are going to Isa River. Yes. Uh-huh.
I also read some information that you said this actually in some poems.
Mm-hmm.
Which was translated in English into some
American memories. I have read about Minor League and long time ago.
San Francisco,
Yes,
the visions of San Francisco Bay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What else? Poems. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So I will say a few words about him, about his the most kind of basic information. So as I said, he was born in 1911, and he died in 2004. So he lived through the century, and he wrote in some of his poem. He said that he was towards the end of his life. He said that he was within this century, like a fly in a number. Absolutely went through absolutely everything. That was born in Russian Empire. His first experience is the experience of First World War in Russia, and of this incredible disorder and murder and so on. Then he came to newly independent Poland. Actually, the family came here to Suwałki, and he went to school and to university in Vilnius, which at that time was a Polish city. And after he graduated with a law degree, and then was working in the radio in Vilnius, and then for political reasons, because he was a leftist, was moved to Warsaw. At the beginning of Second World War, he, like all men who were in Warsaw, was told by the mayor to walk out of the city. So he went with the radio in order to, work on propaganda. He went outside of Warsaw. Then, of course, all of it collapsed the next day. There was no. The Germans were coming in so quickly that all plans collapsed. he went with the government units to Romania, and then he decided to come back to Warsaw, where his wife was, or his girlfriend at that time was, and so on. And because he was completely disenchanted with the government, with the organization of the defense of Poland, with already before the war he was against the regime. And then so he came back, and the last 4 years of Warsaw, he spent in Warsaw, which he described at a certain moment, writing about it later, that it was like annus mundi, that it was just the worst place to be, really the worst. And he saw and experienced a lot of really extreme things. But about this, we probably will talk tomorrow, about his war experiences, about what he wrote about the war, and about his attitudes towards what was happening, because he, for example, did not join the Warsaw Uprising of 1944, which, as you may know, was an uprising that led to a complete destruction of the city of Warsaw and of the death of more than 200,000 civilians. And this 10,000 or 14,000 of fighters who were not really, most of them were not really professional soldiers. So this is something very important, I thought, to talk about, because of the fact that we are dealing with wars in your region and in our region, in all of these wars and tension, and war of Russia against Ukraine, and also a war of Israel in Gaza. So I don't know, I'm sure you, just like me, feel a need to somehow talk about it and have some kind of perhaps clarification about issues of resistance, of how to act, and so on. But today I would like to talk about his itinerary and some poetry. I somehow took some of the poems to read, which would show kind of the main directions of his writings. And all of this in the context that actually Krzysztof encouraged me to talk about, of my life, that is my personal relationship with Miłosz, not so much as a person, although I also knew him and met him many times and translated something for him and so on, but as an émigré, because since I left Poland when I was not even graduate from the university, one of the first people that I met, I stayed in Italy for 3 years. Then when I went to the United States, and during the first summer of my stay in the United States, I had some friends who were doing what, I don't know if it's done now too, that is that a student would drive a car across the United States for somebody who is in Los Angeles, for example, and wants to have a car. So for free, you would drive the car. So we, 4 of us, we were driving a big, amazing car to California. And the first thing that we wanted to do was to visit Czesław Miłosz. I even thought that he was visited like a monument. You had to go, you know, and you had to visit him. Why? Because he abandoned Poland in 1950 when he was abroad. He was at that time in Paris. He was working in the Polish consular services, and he, as they say, I think many languages, they choose freedom. And from that moment on, he was not published in Poland, and he was basically unknown, and he was forbidden. There was one volume that he managed to publish just before he emigrated. He escaped. And that volume of poems, an incredible volume of poems, which is called in English Rescue. That volume, I knew, that is, when I was about 15, the mother of my then future husband, who was at that time also 15, she lent me the volume of the. She was a poet herself, and she was a translator, and she liked very much this group of friends of her son, who then later on all ended in prison, and she also ended in emigration. And she knew Czesław Miłosz from the wartime in Warsaw, and she gave me this volume, not a big one, but that made a very big impression on me. Though I must say that I completely misunderstood. I didn't understand anything from it, really. I loved it, but I really didn't understand what it was about. So as soon as I was able to, I really wanted to meet Czesław Miłosz, who was teaching at that time at Berkeley, and he was very eager to meet with us, with the students from Poland. And what was very important for me at that time, he was 65. He was 65 at that time. He was over 65. And so I was prepared to see an old man. He was a very, one has to add, he was a very, very handsome man, really. Very. And so we saw this man, suntanned, in a jeans jacket, with the issue of the latest issue of a literary monthly from Poland that everybody was sending to him, and. We met outside. He did not invite us to his home because his wife was already very sick, which we didn't know about. And he sat with us and spoke with us, immediately asking us what we think about what he just read in this in the issue of periodical, and incredibly active, incredibly involved, incredibly well informed, well organized. He said that he was a little bit late because he went to swim before, and so I was looking at this, what by my standards at that time was this old man, so active. All the émigrés that I met before were people who were complaining. It was a very difficult moment. There was a lot of people who were in emigration, and there was a lot of people who had a lot of trouble and so on, a problem. problems. And the general tone on conversation was nostalgia and complaints. And here, I think this was a very, very important meeting for me. And my impression was true. This was a man who got up every day, however much he drank the evening before. Every day he worked, every day he wrote. If he couldn't write poetry, he was translating. If he couldn't translate, he was taking notes. If he couldn't take notes, he was drawing, the kind of little flowers on the page. But he was every morning he was sitting at his desk, no matter what. The result of it was that he produced an incredible amount of work. That is, I don't know, that I think maybe only Andrzej Franaszek, only one person read all of this, because the biographer. But otherwise, it's very difficult to really have read everything that he wrote. But everything that he wrote, almost 100%, is really worth reading. That is nowhere did I find anything that I thought. Very often, I had a period in my life that I thought, oh no, he wrote already about it. But then this crisis soon was going away. He was writing poetry only in Polish. He wrote only one poem in English, a letter to somebody in the form of poem. Otherwise, he had this firm conviction that one has to write poetry in the language of his childhood. Mm-hmm. But he also wrote in English essays. He translated his poetry into English with the help of other poets, and his English was absolutely excellent, absolutely excellent. And he was highly educated. He knew Latin. He translated from Latin. He translated from Hebrew. He learned Hebrew. He translated holy books from. He really completely renovated Polish language from this point of view, and he translated from Greek. Translated the Evangels. He from Greek. I mean, from Aramaic, not Greek. Yeah. So I don't know why I said Greek, but.
It was translated from Greek.
From Greek?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Greca, yes. In Polish you say it, yes, but actually it's not. Yeah, no, it's not Grecki, it's Greca. It's in all them. Yeah. He was. He had a very as many difficulties as many other emigres had, but in his posture and in his attitude and his work, he kind of was a guide how to behave in emigration, what to do. It is very hard. I mean, it is very hard to know what to do once you find yourself in a completely new situation and without any flag posts. And he, for me, and I'm sure for many other people, he was somebody who influenced us. That is, he has a poem, apropos, that I was reading. I put on my desk and was looking at it very often. Actually, not the entire poem. The poem is on angels. And it's a little bit typical of him because it's a little bit joking about the existence of angels. But the ending of this poem was something that was important. Which I had on my desk. The poem is the following. All was taken away from you, white dresses, wings, even existence. Yet I believe you, messengers. The world is turned outside out. A heavy fabric embroidered with stars and the beasts. You stroll, inspecting the trustworthy seams. Short is your stay here. Angels, it's directed towards angels. Short is your stay here, now and then, at a matinal hour, if the sky is clear, in a melody repeated by a bird, or in the smell of apples at the close of day, when the light makes the orchards magic. They say somebody has invented you, but to me, this does not sound convincing, for humans invented themselves as well. The voice, no doubt, it is a valid proof, as it can belong only to radiant creatures, weightless and winged. After all, why not? Girdled with the lightning. I have heard that voice many a time when asleep. And what is strange, I understood more or less an order or an appeal in an unearthly tongue. Day draws near. Another one. Do what you can. So this, I'm even moved by it. So even this day draws near. Another one. Do what you can. Is something that I put. Sorry?
Can you read it in Polish or in Czech?
I can, of course I can. It's beautiful. It's beautiful in Polish. Yes? So, o aniołach. Odjęto wam szaty białe, skrzydła i nawet istnienie. Ja jednak wierzę wam, wysłańcy. Tam, gdzie na lewą stronę odwrócony świat, ciężka tkanina haftowana w gwiazdy i zwierzęta, spacerujecie, oglądając prawdomówne ściegi. Krótki wasz postój tutaj, chyba o czasie jutrzennym, jeżeli niebo jest czyste, w melodii powtarzanej przez ptaka albo w zapachu jabłek pod wieczór, kiedy światło zaczaruje sady. Mówią, że ktoś was wymyślił, ale nie przekonuje mnie to, bo ludzie wymyślili także samych siebie. Głos ten jest chyba dowodem, bo przynależy do istot niewątpliwie jasnych, lekkich, skrzydlatych, dlaczegożby nie, przepasanych błyskawicą. Słyszałem ten głos nieraz we śnie i, co dziwniejsze, rozumiałem mniej więcej nakaz albo wezwanie w nadziemskim języku. Zaraz dzień, jeszcze jeden, zrób co możesz. Yeah, zaraz dzień. Tak. Now, the characteristic thing which is important about Miłosz is that he was somebody who did not fit into any Polish or external kind of form of being in a society. He was. He was. Well, I think I'm writing about it in this little fragment that you were given. He was when in his Nobel Prize, literary Nobel Prize, he got Nobel Prize in Literature in 1980. In this speech, in his banquet speech, as they call it, he did not once call himself Polish. he said about himself that he's a poet of Polish. He's a poet of Polish language, and he was talking about Lithuania, about the Baltics, about the unfree people. And he was. You wouldn't find a declaration in this speech that would kind of limit him to kind of describe him with one word, what his origin was. The same thing, the only other speech of that sort that I found in which the Nobel Prize laureate did not declare himself with the language, with the name of Frenchman, for example, in this case, was Albert Camus, who was an Algerian Frenchman, and who during this his speech, and this was a time of Franco-Algerian War, he didn't say that he was French. He was basically left this, just like Miłosz, left this to the question of language, and he was so these are, I wonder, I'm sure there are other cases like that as well, but these are the two people who behave in the same way in this kind of the moment of this high the high honor that they were given and the possibility of talking to the entire world. So he was it's a very interesting thing because he is a Polish poet, and he is a Polish poet in many ways than one. That is, he wrote a history of Polish literature. He devoted many years to produce a volume of history of Polish literature. He helped an enormous amount of Polish poets to be published. He translated Polish poets into English. He produced an anthology, very successful anthology of Polish poetry, which in 1965 was published in the United States, and which completely changed the reception of Polish poetry, and also influenced a lot of American poets who then spoke about it and wrote about it, especially the discovery of Zbigniew Herbert, who was a poet whom Miłosz translated and promoted at the beginning at the expense of his own translations, because he considered himself untranslatable, while considered Zbigniew Herbert a calligraphic poet, whose language is much easier to translate into foreign language. So to show you his really complicated attitude towards the Polishness, I think I would read you another poem. Maybe you should read it. I don't know, just me reading all the time. 50 naród. Tak? 50. To może ja przeczytam po angielsku, a ty po polsku, tak? Actually, I should read two poems. You know, there was a poem he wrote. Both of these poems are from 1950, when he was already abroad, and but he's kind of fighting the Polish regime. One of these poems is now on the monument of Solidarity monument which is in Gdańsk. This monument that was built in 1981, still before the martial law stopped Solidarity. And it is a short poem, very powerful, and not very typical for him, but the best remembered in Poland. And its title is You Who Wronged. You who wronged a simple man, bursting into laughter at the crime, and kept a pack of fools around you to mix good and evil, to blur the line. Though everyone bowed down before you, saying virtue and wisdom lit your way, striking gold medals in your honor, glad to have survived another day, do not feel safe. The poet remembers. You can kill one, but another is born. The words are written down, the deed, the date, and you'd have done better with a winter dawn, a rope and a branch bowed beneath your weight. It's written in Washington in 1950. Maybe just before he
Który skrzywdziłeś człowieka prostego, śmiechem nad krzywdą jego wybuchając, gromadę błaznów koło siebie mając, na pomieszanie dobrego i złego, choćby przed tobą wszyscy się skłonili, cnotę i mądrość tobie przypisując, złote medale na twoją cześć kując, radzi, że jeszcze dzień jeden przeżyli. Nie bądź bezpieczny. Poeta pamięta. Możesz go zabić. Narodzi się nowy. Spisane będą czyny i rozmowy. Lepszy dla ciebie byłby świt zimowy i sznur, i gałąź pod ciężarem zgięta.
So this was his kind of a scream, but he rarely wrote poems that were so directly political, if ever, very, very rarely. His idea was that one needs a distance, an emotional detachment in order to produce a good poem. And if you didn't have it, then there was you were becoming sentimental, and the poetry is suffering from it. During Second World War in Poland and in Warsaw especially, everybody wrote poetry. There was a lot of poetry published. People had the need to write poetry, and he wrote about this poetry. He was one of this kind of underground publisher and organizer of cultural life, and he wrote that none of it was good poetry, that you really needed to be cool, as work not through sentiment, but through mind. And this is another poem, this poem called The Nation, that I don't feel that you need to know the entire one. Yeah, it's too long. But I just want to show you his attitude towards the Polishness. He says, a nation, the purest of nations on earth, when it's judged by a flash of lightning, but thoughtless and sly in everyday toil. Pitiless to its widows and orphans, pitiless to its old people, stealing a crust of bread from a child's hand, ready to offer their lives to draw heaven's wrath on their foes, smiting their enemy with the screams of orphans and women's, entrusting power to men with the eyes of traders in gold, elevating men with the conscience of brothel keepers. It's a lot of kind of the offensive kind of attacks on the nation. And then he says, great nation, invincible nation, ironic nation. They know how to distinguish truth and yet to keep silent. They camp on marketplaces, conversing in wisecracks. They deal in all the door handles stolen from ruins, and so on. But the end is the following, the kind of two last lines. A man of that nation, standing by his son's cradle, repeats words of hope, always, till now, in vain. Sorry?
Like the last sentence was quite similar of one of the greatest Georgian author, the Otar Chiladze's ending of the man was going on the road. Like it was quite similar.
Otar Chiladze.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's the title of that poem?
It's a novel, but like the very last sentence of that novel is somehow I have the. It gave the same association as the ending of this poem, like.
And what is the poem and what is the
No,
sentence?
it's a novel, and I don't know how to translate. The man was walking on the road. It's like it's kind of mythical and imaginable and imaginary and folklore at the same time. And very last sentence is like. Was the fuzzy sea, it's the old name of this, like always the same, and the very last sentence is it always was and it always will be, or something like this. I don't remember, but the association is exactly the same.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Sounds like we have a publishing plan. Yes. Otar Chiladze. Yes.
So this is one kind of ironic line of his writing. Another example, something that I really think is an amazing short poem. It is about empire, about living within empire, and it is. This is worth hearing. It's strona 29 tych. Poczekaj, ile to jest? 164 tutaj. It's a kind of collection of separate short poems. And it is, Miłosz was very, very aware of, I mean, he understood what empire was all about. And he was very much friends with Joseph Brodsky, but he was very, very critical of his attitude towards empire and very well understood what he meant, didn't consider him, many people were, including myself, to a certain degree, because I was very interested in it, but I didn't really understand the extent of Brodsky's commitment to Great Russia. People did not understand, I think, his relationship to the empire, while Miłosz understood it very well. And the poem is the following. In the shadow of the empire, in old Slavonic long johns, you better learn to like your shame, because it will stay with you. It won't go away even if you change your country and your name. The dolorous shame of failure, shame of the Metternich heart, of fawning eagerness, of clever pretending, of dusty roads on the plain and trees lopped off for fuel. You sit in a shabby house, putting things off until spring. No flowers in the garden. They would be trampled anyway. You eat lazy dumplings, the soup dessert called floating island served cold, and always humiliated. You hate foreigners.
It's about Brodsky's poem on Ukraine, is that right?
No.
Not this one, but
It
could be.
Yeah, but that's a great note, because this is one of the examples of Brodsky's imperialism. Yeah.
What?
I was not a huge fan of the Brodsky, sorry.
It's not easy to stay so poetic and to write political poetry.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, for poets, it's like walking on the surface of night, you know.
Yeah, let's register everything that you say. Yeah.
If I may add a comment about the political lyrics and so on, and the worry lyrics. There is a poet and Ukrainian writer, his name is Serhiy Zhadan, and he recently had his one-man concert in like a huge concert area in Kiev, and there was just Serhiy Zhadan on the stage, and he was reading poems, and like it was full booked, which is insane, just for a poet. And I wasn't there, but then I was listening to the full recording of the radio culture, and there was like an introduction by a man's voice. And now Ukrainian poet Serhiy Zhadan will present his war lyrics, and then like it really starts. So I think this is the question that many of Ukrainian poets and writers were facing now, because you have something that you have to express, and that there is a reality that you have to describe. And then there is something that you would also like to perceive and to reflect on, and then to give it, like to pass it further. So I think to some certain extent, it's like you cannot avoid it. You will have to live through this just the way you are. So especially when Zhadan was reading some of his like early lyrics, because he's a classic now. So when he was reading them, and then when he was reading his recent poems, I would say that he's a prophet, or maybe this is this futuristic function of art, when someone kind of invents the future, or like maybe senses it, and then it appears to be just like this in some period of time. So this is something that I would really like say, that this is something that exists, and this is something that is really important. And maybe if I interrupted you, I have one question. How was Miłosz perceived in Poland? Being so abroad, being there, and being like not Polish, but...
You know, this is a very good question, as they say when people are asked a difficult question. That is, in Poland there is a tradition of émigré poetry, and the best Polish poetry has been written abroad. All romantic poets were in Paris, and they wrote. They were criticized for being abroad, but because the nation didn't, probably no nation likes emigration, people who leave, but nobody can deny that this is the best, truly the best, the kind of the essence of Polish literature has been produced there. So from that point of view, there are many people who embrace Miłosz. But there is another movement there is another poet who was in Poland, although he spent most of the time abroad too, but he never emigrated, and who was speaking not in this way, but in a very patriotic way, but an excellent poem, Zbigniew Herbert. And there, at a certain moment, there was, both of these men became symbols of one, Miłosz, of, I don't know, liberal cosmopolitanism, and Herbert of true patriotism. And I know, for example, from publishers that Miłosz doesn't sell well. He is taught in school, so that is enough in order to publish him. But it's not that he, and really people better remember Herbert than Miłosz.
But he presented himself as American, Polish.
He never presented himself as an American Polish. He was very loyal towards the United States and wrote about the most important thing also about him being a model for emigre for me was that he was very interested in where he was. He was not somebody who was looking only back to Poland and thinking only about Poland. He really looked at the at where he was and wrote a book about Berkeley in 1968, which was, quite a challenge. He traveled all around. He visited enormous amounts of United States, in Oregon, in California. Traveled. Was very interested in life. He went to Texas. He was somebody who really absorbed everything that was around him. But he did not consider himself American in any way. It was too late for him. He was over 60 when he came to the United States. I mean, it's not so easy to identify oneself with a country. And was for a very long time he was quite isolated. Only after Nobel Prize he became this celebrity.
Wikipedia, or I don't know, some critics gave him this status, or how to say, American.
They will do it. They will do it. I mean, they count this. His Nobel. It's like Olympics. His Nobel counts for the United States, not for Poland, because he was at that time he was a citizen of the United States, not of Poland. So he's. Sorry. Yeah, it's counted as American. For he got for poetry. The problem for him was that he in 1951 wrote a book, The Captive Mind, that I see that you have on your reading list, and that book became a bestseller. And therefore, he was known during the Cold War, when it was very important on what side you are. This book, very original book, was very well known, and he was known as an author of that. While his poetry at that time was not yet translated into English, and was a little bit translated into French, but in French he didn't caught. They didn't really. I don't know. Either he had bad translators or. So he was known and for a very long time he fought against it. And finally his poetry came out, and he got for both things. He got Nobel Prize for both his Captive Mind and his poetry. Yeah. But he has another kind of motive that goes through his poetry, which is very beautiful and which is ecstatic. You know, something completely different than what I read you. I would like to read two poems, short poems of his showing this, basically two motives. One motive is which comes over and over in his poetry, which is about the time, that time is passing. It kind of, where is the time that was, and then, which is a common thing in poetry as a topic, but another one is an ecstatic one. So I will start with the time, and with one of his earliest poems, written when he was something like 22, still in Vilnius, not 22, but in 37. So he was 26. Written and published before the war, and one day I saw this poem traveling in the morning to work on subway in New York. In this, you know, there are these poems that are written there. Sometimes you can read it. I kind of lifted my eyes and I saw this poem within, you know, on the wall. It's called Encounter. We were riding through frozen fields in a wagon at dawn. A red wing rose in the darkness, and suddenly a hare ran across the road. One of us pointed to it with his hand. That was long ago. Today, neither of them is alive, not the hare, nor the man who made the gesture. Oh, my love, where are they? Where are they going? The flash of a hand, streak of movement, rustle of pebbles. I ask not out of sorrow, but in wonder. So this is one of the motives that he comes back in his poetry often. And an ecstatic one, it's also a very favorite poem of the many people that I know. It's called Gift. Gift. A day so happy. Fog lifted early. I worked in the garden. Hummingbirds were stopping over honeysuckle flowers. There was no thing on earth I wanted to possess. I knew no one worth my envying him. Whatever evil I had suffered, I forgot. To think that once I was the same man did not embarrass me. In my body, I felt no pain. When straightening up, I saw the blue sea and sails.
Do you think that he was like eclectic poet? I have this perception when I read. I have this perception when I read some of his poems. So when I read some of his poems translated in English, I had this feeling that he's very eclectic for me. Like there are many Miłoszs in it, because this is the person who can write, for example, the day of the ending of world, or I don't remember that.
Yeah.
And the song of loneliness, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So
But as far as I remember, the word eclectic, it's a negative word. No, eclectic.
No, I don't mean in negative.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a wrong word, but
Diverse.
diverse. Many Miłoshes.
Yeah, he's a very capable poet. He can do a lot of things. I'm reading now these short poems. He has a lot of. He writes the Whitmanesque, long line, kind of biblical texts. He writes songs. He translated Shakespeare. He translated short songs from Shakespeare's play. He knows how to do everything. He's a phenomenal translator. In fact, he is a tremendous talent, and combined with an incredible intelligence, and memory. So it's a phenomenon. I mean, I am working on him, working and reading, and so on. On the side, I'm doing other things as well. But I am absolutely enchanted by him over and over again. And I'm finding he's a polemicist. He has so many writerly talents. And in fact, one thing, and memory, incredible memory, and this seriousness of work, this attitude. He's like a craftsman at the same time. That he's trying various styles. He's changing things. He produced a little volume of Japanese haiku. I really recommend him to say it like that. I mean, you always find something else. I just feel that it wouldn't be good for us, to read something very long in a foreign language. So I'm just concentrating on the short things and fragments, but it's just to show the topics. And I like also his very kind of joking poets, not even kind of, because there's a lot of suffering in his, of course, in his poems. He also knows how to describe violence, which is very difficult in poems, as the writers know. And actually, here Zbigniew Herbert is better than, I think, than him. It's a strange competition, of course, invented by me, but I was looking for finding out, is it possible to describe pain in language in general, in poetry? It is very hard. There is one poem of Miłosz that approaches but in general, he was somebody who was working till the last moment, basically till the last. He was already basically blind and sick, and still produced a poem every second day or something like that. So
Yes, or maybe you have questions, more questions.
yeah, please.
So you said that he chose to write poetry in Polish, and you said that he explained it like that. He wrote poetry in his in the language of his childhood, right? But somehow this explanation is kind of not enough for me. I think
that beyond this, there would be some political reasons, of course. This is something for me also a political statement, because he was fluent, proficient in English. He lived in this English language world, and he was not even seduced to write a single line of poetry into English. So I would like to hear more about this.
He said at some insistent questioning, he said he was unable to write in English, unable to write poetry in English. That he didn't hear it.
Do you believe in this? That
I
he
do.
could not.
I do.
He could not write poetry in English.
Poetry, I do.
You do?
Because he had. On what basis I do? Because I looked, for example, in the archive at his notebooks, at his trying to write a poem, and the simple sentences he was writing as if he was thinking about it for a poem and so on. He thinks uniquely in Polish. And he translated, whenever he translated his poems into English, he did it always with somebody. He always asked poets. He had poet friends with whom he translated.
And did he experience like Polish language in everyday life, like in his surroundings?
For a very long time, he had a wife and he had 2 sons and they spoke Polish at home.
All of them spoke Polish.
All of them spoke
Polish.
Maybe
I know that I'm too biased to ask this question, because today the context, I think, is very different, because lots of writers, when they change let's say, home, they also change the language.
Yeah.
Almost all of them in today's world, and that's why it felt a bit strange, but very pleasantly strange for me.
But I repeat that he went to the... He went... I will just respond and he went to the United States when he was over 60. So... I know. What did you say? I was...
I don't think that it's about the age still when you...
Maybe not. There is a cafe in the village in New York, Cornelia Cafe, where there is poetry readings by foreign-born poets. Regularly, where? I mean, I didn't go there for last, I don't know, a couple of years. But there are evenings presenting, and there are poems, Vietnamese poets who read poems in Vietnamese and also in English, and so on. There's a movement of people writing in English from another language. People writing with a conscious accent in English now. It's very, very interesting. It's amazing. But there was too bad that the enthusiast of Brodsky is not here. But there is I hope I didn't offend him so much. No? There is an exchange of letters between Brodsky and Miłosz about that subject. About that subject. Miłosz writes to Brodsky when Brodsky came to the United States. Miłosz, who was a very practical man, wanted to support Brodsky, but also wanted to find a translator for his poems into the Russian, and he didn't hide it. In the first letter that he wrote to Brodsky, he wrote about it. But he said also to him, he said that Brodsky should write, that he shouldn't really just despair and kind of throw away his work because he's an immigrant. That this moment, it's a moment that you know, it's a challenge. This will be what will prove what matter you are made of. He says to him, and Brodsky immediately, he really took the challenge and felt it as a challenge. And Miłosz said, in fact, it's a mistake to think that one cannot write poetry unless one is in one's own country. This is as far as he went. Yeah, but when he was in France, when he cut himself off, he was horrified that he will not be able. He said, this is a prejudice of old era that one cannot write outside of one's own country, or one's, you know, of being within this language, because this is what was believed. I think this is what was believed, that people have to have a constant contact with the language, spoken language, even the people's language, you know, in order to be able to be inspired to write.
If I may add a little bit about Milan Kundera, who started writing in French, actually after, 1968, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And if I'm also not mistaken about Brodsky, who was given lessons on creative writing in order to learn English better.
Brodsky started to write poetry in English, and it is tragic that he died at age 56 when he was really taking off in English poetry. I mean, it would have been really amazing if he really managed to complete it. He was ready. He was going into another language. So maybe it's 60. It doesn't matter the age. Yes, you are right. But he really wanted to do it, and I was incredibly fascinated by to watch it, because some of his poems in English were becoming better and better and better. And as far as Kundera goes, you know, it's an interesting thing. This novels that he wrote in French are definitely worse than the novels that he wrote in Czech. Yes, but was this because of the language, or was this, and being abroad, or was this that very often we have, you know, writers who have very, very good initial work, and then the work later on does not match it. I don't know if this is true, because there are very many counter examples. You know, to mention Beckett, for example. If it's, I mean, it's. There are people who switch languages, and that doesn't damage them. Quite the opposite. But I do think that Miłosz was not able to do it because he was. And I think that Brodsky was able to do it. What was the limitation in the case of Brodsky was that he had a very clear idea that the poem has to be rhymed and have a very strong rhythm. Now, this is not what English language poetry now is. This is now in English language poetry, it is rhyming and having this strong rhythm within it is considered that you are writing a song or a poetry for children. It kind of lowers the quality for other people. I, for example, suffer from it very much because there is a lot of poems. I see a lot of poetry translated, rhymed poetry translated from Polish, for example, that is translated without rhymes, and it sounds like summary. It absolutely doesn't correspond to the. There were some volumes of a phenomenal Polish poet, Zuzanna Ginczanka, that were published in English, and Polish Jewish poet, a woman from Ruvne, Ukrainian, yes, who grew up speaking Russian, but then she moved into Polish and wrote poetry and was killed during the war. So she produced. There was one volume of her poetry that was published, and she's now being discovered. But the translations, I don't know what to say. Whenever I'm protesting against translating it without rhymes, people say rhymes. So this is what made the people in New York not appreciate the English language poetry of Brodsky. And this is what he was fighting against. Because he was ready to relinquish in this domain. I'm sure he would do really amazing things, surprising amazing things. But he died.